The story takes place in Arizona, in a quiet town where the roar of motorcycles is more common than laughter. Ethan Cole, a 48-year-old biker, spends his days repairing bikes and his nights drinking coffee alone on his porch, staring at the desert stars. Once part of a motorcycle club, he left everything behind after losing his best friend in an accident and realizing he'd never have the family he once dreamed of. One rainy evening, a young woman named Claire Thompson appears at his door with a broken-down car and her 6-year-old son, Tommy. That single knock becomes the beginning of Ethan's emotional rebirth, a story about pain, redemption, and unexpected love. The wind howled across the Arizona plains, carrying with it the dry scent of sand and the faint hum of distant thunder. Inside a small wooden cabin off Route 66, a single bulb swung lazily from the ceiling, its light carving soft shadows across the walls, covered with old biker posters and the smell of oil and leather. Ethan Cole sat by the window, mug of black coffee cooling in his hands, eyes fixed on the rain beginning to fall. It was rare to rain out here. When it did, it felt like the sky was trying to wash away something that couldn't be cleaned. At 48, Ethan had the kind of face that told stories without words, creases of road dust and years of silence. His beard was streaked with grey, his arms tattooed with fading memories of a past life, a biker club emblem, the initials of a woman he once loved, the name of a brother he'd buried too young. He wasn't a bad man, just one who'd stopped believing in good endings. Every night he sat in that same spot, staring into nothing, feeling the echo of all the things that never came. The wife he never married, the child he never had, the home that was always just a temporary stop on an endless ride. The sound came sudden, 3 knocks on wood, sharp, uncertain. For a moment he thought the wind had played tricks on him. Then came another, softer this time, almost pleading. He frowned, set his mug aside and stood up, boots heavy on the old floorboards. "Who the hell's out here at this hour?" he muttered, grabbing the flashlight from the counter. Midnight was no time for visitors, not in a place where the nearest neighbor was miles away. When he opened the door, rain blew in sideways, soaking the doorway in seconds. Standing in the storm was a young woman, maybe early 30s, with wet hair plastered to her face and a little boy clinging to her leg. Her voice trembled between exhaustion and fear. "Please, I'm sorry to bother you. My car broke down a mile back. The road's empty. There's no signal. We've been walking for hours." Ethan hesitated. He hadn't had anyone knock on that door in months, maybe years. The sight of her shivering, the boy clutching her coat, stirred something buried deep inside him. Without a word, he stepped aside. "Come in before you both freeze." The woman entered cautiously, dripping rainwater on the wooden floor. The boy, maybe 6 or 7, had wide brown eyes that scanned the room. The tools, the leather jacket hung on a chair, the photographs on the wall. Ethan noticed the way the child's fingers clutched his mother's sleeve, like she was his anchor in a storm. The woman smiled weakly, voice cracking. "I'm Claire, this is Tommy. Thank you for letting us in." Ethan gave a short nod. "Ethan, coffee's hot if you want some. Towels are in the bathroom, first door on the left." While she disappeared into the small bathroom, Ethan crouched near the stove, throwing in a few logs until the room filled with the smell of burning pine. The boy stayed near the door, silent, staring at a photograph on the wall. A younger Ethan, standing beside another man, both wearing leather vests and wide grins. The logo read, "Iron Saints Motorcycle Club." "That your brother?" the boy asked. Ethan glanced at the photo, his jaw tightening. "Yeah, he was." The boy nodded, as if he understood something wordless about loss. When Claire returned, wrapped in an old towel, she looked different, softer now, but still carrying the weight of the road in her eyes. "I didn't mean to intrude," she said quietly. "We were on our way to Flagstaff. My engine started smoking and I just kept driving until it died. I saw the light from your porch." Ethan shrugged, pouring her a cup of coffee. "Not many stop here. Guess you got lucky I was awake." "Lucky?" she repeated with a faint smile. "That's one way to see it." For a while, the only sounds were the crackling fire and the storm pressing against the windows. Ethan studied her when she wasn't looking. The tremble in her fingers, the faint bruise of fatigue beneath her eyes, the way she kept glancing at her son as if afraid he might vanish. She wasn't the kind of woman who got lost easily. Whatever she was running from, it wasn't just a broken car. Tommy had fallen asleep on the couch, wrapped in Ethan's old army jacket. The sight of the small boy breathing softly stirred a strange ache in Ethan's chest, an ache he hadn't felt in years. He turned back to the fire, trying to swallow the thought, but it stayed there, stubborn like a spark that refused to die. "You live out here alone?" Claire asked, her voice breaking the quiet. "Yeah," he said. "Used to have company back when I was young and stupid. These days it's just me and the road." She nodded slowly. "I know what that's like. Being alone, I mean." Ethan looked at her, the weight of her words settling between them. "You got family?" She hesitated. "Not anymore. Just me and him." Her eyes flicked toward Tommy. "His dad left when he was born." Ethan's jaw tightened. "People leave too damn easy these days." Claire gave a bitter laugh. "Yeah, and some people stay too long when they should have gone." He didn't ask what she meant. He didn't need to. The look in her eyes told him enough. She'd seen her share of heartbreak too. The fire dimmed, painting their faces in soft orange light. Outside, the rain softened to a whisper. For the first time in years, Ethan didn't feel the weight of silence pressing on him. There was something about their presence, this woman and her child, that made the cabin feel less like a tomb and more like a home. When Claire stood to check on her son, she paused by the door. "Thank you again, Ethan, for helping strangers in the middle of nowhere." He shook his head. "Ain't much, just doing what I'd hoped someone would do for me." She smiled faintly. "Not everyone would. Good night." "Night, Claire." As she disappeared into the small guest room, Ethan sat back down by the fire, staring at the sleeping boy on his couch. The kid's small hands clutched his jacket like it meant safety. Ethan rubbed his eyes, a faint smile touching his face, the kind that comes after years of forgetting how. For the first time in a long while, the cabin didn't feel empty. Outside, the storm passed, leaving the desert washed clean and quiet. Inside, a man who had spent his life running from ghosts felt something stir again, something that sounded a lot like hope. The morning light crept through the blinds, painting thin stripes of gold across the dusty floorboards. Ethan woke to the smell of coffee, not his usual bitter brew, but something softer, warmer. For a moment, his mind refused to adjust. Then he remembered the woman, the boy, the storm. He rubbed his eyes and stood up, his boots heavy against the old planks. In the kitchen, Claire stood barefoot, wearing one of his old flannel shirts, sleeves rolled to her elbows. Her hair, still damp from an early wash, caught the sunlight in loose strands. She turned when she heard him. "Morning," she said, voice gentle. "I found some coffee beans in your cabinet. Hope you don't mind." Ethan cleared his throat. "Not at all. Been a long time since anyone made coffee in this house besides me." Tommy sat at the small wooden table, a piece of toast in his hands, eyes curious and bright now that the fear of the night had faded. He looked different in the daylight, the kind of kid who asked a lot of questions and noticed everything. "Are those your motorcycles outside?" he asked. Ethan nodded. "Yeah, the black one's mine. The red's just a project I've been fixing up." Tommy's eyes widened. "Can you teach me how to ride one?" Ethan chuckled softly, the sound surprising even himself. "Maybe when you're a little taller." Claire smiled at the exchange, though there was a faint sadness behind her expression, a quiet awareness that her son was finding in a stranger what he'd never had in his own father. She turned her eyes back to the window, where the desert stretched endlessly, washed clean by the storm. "The car's still there," she said quietly. "Think it'll start again?" "Probably not," Ethan said. "I'll drive out and take a look after breakfast. Might be the radiator or the belt. You're lucky you made it this far." They spent the next few hours outside, the sun burning away the remnants of rain. Ethan lifted the hood of the old blue sedan, muttering under his breath as he checked the engine. Claire stood nearby, arms folded, while Tommy chased a grasshopper through the dirt. The boys' laughter echoed in the open air, light and free, a sound Ethan realized he hadn't heard on his property in over a decade. "Looks like your alternator's fried," he said finally, wiping his hands on a rag. "Won't get far without replacing it. Closest parts shop's 30 miles from here." Claire's face fell. 30 miles? "Yeah, I can head out there tomorrow morning, but for now, you're stuck with me." Her lips curved into a reluctant smile. "Could be worse," he smirked. "Yeah, you could have knocked on Old Man Perry's door. He'd have chased you off with a shotgun." She laughed softly, a rare, genuine sound that made something tighten in Ethan's chest. Back at the cabin, Claire offered to cook dinner as a thank you. Ethan tried to refuse, but she insisted, moving through the kitchen like she'd lived there for years. The smell of garlic and onions filled the air, mixing with the faint scent of motor oil and desert dust. Tommy sat on the counter, legs swinging, watching her slice vegetables with the seriousness of a little apprentice. Ethan stood by the doorway watching them, a strange warmth blooming inside him. He had forgotten what it was like to have life in this house, the sound of someone humming, the clatter of dishes, the smell of real food. For years, his world had been all silence and engines and empty nights. But now, everything felt alive again. When dinner was ready, they sat around the small table. Claire had made pasta with canned tomatoes and a little bit of the dried herbs she'd found in the pantry. It wasn't fancy, but it was the best thing Ethan had eaten in years. Tommy grinned between mouthfuls. "You should open a restaurant," he said. Claire laughed. "Trust me, kid. Nobody wants to eat my cooking twice." Ethan shook his head. "Speak for yourself." As the evening settled in, Claire and Tommy helped him wash the dishes. The radio played softly in the background, old country songs about highways and heartbreak. Claire swayed her hips a little to the rhythm, humming along. Tommy joined in, drumming on the counter with his hands. Ethan couldn't help but smile. For the first time in years, he wasn't just living, he was there in the moment. Later, after the dishes were done and the boy was asleep, Claire joined Ethan on the porch. The desert night was clear now, stars burning like distant fires. She wrapped her arms around herself, breathing in the cool air. "Tommy really likes you," she said quietly. Ethan took a sip of his coffee. "He's a good kid. Reminds me of, well, the kind of kid I used to want." Claire turned to him, her expression soft. "You wanted kids?" He nodded slowly. "Yeah. Back then I thought I'd have a family by now. But the road got in the way. The club, the rides, the noise. It all felt like freedom. Until one day it didn't." She studied him for a moment. "People change." "Maybe," he said, "but sometimes by the time you do, it's too late to fix what you broke." Silence stretched between them, comfortable yet heavy. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, its lonely cry echoing across the open land. Claire looked up at the stars, her voice barely a whisper. "I used to think I had it all figured out," she said. "Then one day I woke up and everything I built was gone. Tommy's dad left. Bills piled up. I thought if I drove far enough, maybe I could start over somewhere no one knew me." Ethan looked at her, his eyes kind. "You can start over anywhere, Claire. Doesn't have to be far." She smiled faintly. "You sound like a man who knows something about second chances." He looked away. "Maybe I'm just someone who wishes he'd taken his first one seriously." They sat in silence again, the sound of the desert wind wrapping around them like an old song. For the first time, Ethan didn't feel like a ghost in his own life. He didn't feel like a man waiting for something that would never come. When Claire finally went inside, Ethan stayed on the porch a little longer, watching the stars. The boy's laughter still echoed faintly in his mind, mixing with the warmth of her voice. He didn't understand it yet, but somewhere deep inside, a door had opened. A door he'd locked a long time ago. 2 days had passed since the storm. The desert was dry again, as if the rain had never come. Claire and Tommy had settled into Ethan's cabin like they'd always been part of it. There was laughter in the mornings, the smell of food in the kitchen, and the faint sound of Tommy's footsteps echoing across the porch every time he chased the lizards that darted between the rocks. For Ethan, the days felt different now, longer but lighter. He caught himself doing small things he hadn't done in years. Cooking breakfast for someone else, fixing the broken hinge on the door, cleaning the old photograph frames that had gathered dust on the shelf. Each task was simple, but together they began to rebuild something inside him he thought was gone, the rhythm of a home. That afternoon he sat outside tightening the bolts on his bike when Claire walked up, wiping her hands on a towel. "You work on that thing more than you sleep," she teased. Ethan smirked. "Machines don't complain when you fix them." She tilted her head. "Maybe that's why you like them." He chuckled, but there was truth in her words. He liked machines because they were predictable. They broke, you repaired them, and they worked again. People weren't like that. People carried cracks that couldn't be welded shut. Claire sat on the steps beside him. Her hair danced with the wind, and for a while they just listened to the sound of the open road, the hum of the highway in the distance, the whisper of sand moving like water. Then she asked softly, "Do you ever miss it, the life you had before?" Ethan looked at the horizon. "Every day. But I miss what I thought it was, not what it really was. The road makes you feel free, but after a while you realize you're just running from something you don't want to face." She nodded slowly, her eyes lowered. "Maybe that's why we ended up here, two runners pretending the finish line doesn't exist." Before Ethan could answer, the sound of an engine broke through the stillness. A black pickup truck pulled up the dirt road, tires kicking up dust. Ethan's expression changed. A shadow crossed his face. He stood up slowly, instinctively wiping his hands on his jeans. "Stay inside," he told Claire quietly. The truck stopped near the porch. The door opened, and a man stepped out. Leather vest, silver rings, and the kind of stare that could cut through glass. He was from Ethan's past. There was no mistaking it. "Cole," the man said with a smirk. "Didn't think I'd ever find you in a place like this." Ethan's voice was low, steady. "You found me, now tell me why." The man, Rex Miller, one of the old Iron Saints, spat into the dirt. "You disappeared, brother. Left us with all the heat when things went south. You think you can just vanish and play house in the middle of nowhere?" Claire stepped out despite Ethan's warning, Tommy hiding behind her leg. "Is everything okay?" Rex's eyes flicked toward her, then back to Ethan. "Didn't know you'd gone domestic, Cole." "Cute kid. Yours?" Ethan's fists clenched. "Don't talk to them." Rex raised his hands in mock surrender. "Easy, man. I just came to deliver a message. The club ain't done with you. You still owe us, remember?" "I don't owe you a damn thing," Ethan said. "That life's over." Rex smiled coldly. "Life doesn't just end because you walk away. You know how it works. You can't ride with the Saints, take our cut, then disappear. You're one of us, whether you like it or not." Ethan stepped closer, his voice a growl. "Tell them to forget I ever existed." Rex leaned in, his breath reeking of tobacco. "Can't do that. You walked away from more than the club, brother. You walked away from blood. You think burying your old life out here with some woman and her kid will save you? It won't." The words hit harder than Rex could know. Ethan had buried too many things: guilt, memories, love. And no matter how deep, the past had claws. He didn't speak again. He just stared until Rex shrugged and turned toward his truck. "You know where to find us," he called, "and sooner or later, we'll come find you." When the sound of the engine faded into the distance, Claire finally spoke. "Who was that?" Ethan sighed, his voice low. "Someone I used to know. Someone I hoped I'd never see again." "Are you in danger?" she asked. He shook his head. "Not yet, but the thing about the road, Claire, it never forgets who rode it." That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. The old ghosts had been stirred, and they wouldn't rest quietly. He walked out to the porch, the moon washing the desert in silver. The stars looked colder than before. Inside, he could hear Claire's faint breathing, the soft rustle of Tommy turning in his sleep. The sound comforted him more than he'd admit. He sat down, lighting a cigarette, his first in months. The smoke curled into the night and memories rose with it. Faces, voices, the crash, the fire. His brother, the one in the photograph, dying on the asphalt while sirens wailed in the distance. The moment Ethan walked away from everything that tied him to that pain. He joined the Iron Saints when he was 20, chasing belonging. He'd left when belonging turned into bloodshed, but leaving didn't erase what he'd done or who he'd been. And now it was knocking again. Claire appeared at the door, wrapped in a blanket. "Couldn't sleep." He looked up. "Didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't." She stepped closer, her voice soft. "You don't have to tell me everything. But you can't pretend it's nothing." Ethan exhaled slowly. "I used to ride with a club. We did things I'm not proud of. When my brother died, I blamed them. Blamed myself more. I left. I thought if I disappeared far enough, maybe the road wouldn't follow. But it always does." She sat beside him, the blanket brushing his arm. "Everyone has something chasing them, Ethan. The difference is, most people never stop to face it." He looked at her, and for the first time he didn't see pity. He saw understanding. "Why are you here, Claire, really?" he asked. She hesitated. "Because I needed to get away too. From a man who hurt us. From a life that made me forget who I was." They sat there in silence, two broken souls bound by the same invisible thread, running from the past, but somehow colliding in its path. Inside the cabin, Tommy stirred in his sleep, murmuring Ethan's name. Claire smiled faintly at the sound, her eyes glistening. Ethan looked away, heart heavy but warm. "You and that boy, you brought something back I thought I'd lost for good." "And what's that?" she asked gently. "Home." She placed her hand over his, not as an answer, but as a quiet promise, that even if the past came knocking again, this time he wouldn't face it alone. The sun rose blood orange over the Arizona horizon, and with it came the weight of a silence Ethan hadn't felt in years. It wasn't the peaceful kind of silence that filled his mornings before Claire and Tommy arrived. It was heavy, taut, like the moment before a storm breaks. He knew Rex's visit wasn't a coincidence. The Iron Saints didn't just show up to talk when they came. It was for a reason, and if Rex had found him here, it meant others could too. Inside the cabin, the sound of laughter floated from the kitchen. Claire was helping Tommy draw on the back of a cereal box. Ethan watched from the doorway, her hair loose, sunlight spilling across her face, the boy's small fingers gripping a crayon as if it were the most important thing in the world. He wanted to stay in that moment forever, but the truth was already closing in. Claire noticed his distant gaze. "What's wrong?" Ethan forced a small smile. "Nothing. Just thinking I should get that alternator today." "You're not telling me everything," she said softly. He looked away. "Maybe I'm just trying to protect you." The words hung between them, heavy, unsaid things behind them. Claire's voice trembled just slightly. "Protect me from what, Ethan?" He didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed his jacket, the old leather one with faded patches from a life he'd sworn to forget. "I'll be back before dark," he said, stepping out into the heat. The road stretched endlessly ahead, shimmering in the midday sun. Ethan's bike roared across it like a wounded animal, the engine's growl mixing with the ghosts in his mind. Every mile brought him closer to the small auto shop in Winslow, and closer to the past he'd tried to bury. When he arrived, the place was nearly empty. He killed the engine and walked in, helmet under his arm. The bell above the door jingled. Behind the counter stood Marty, a man in his 50s with grease-stained hands and eyes that had seen too much. "Well, I'll be damned," Marty said, squinting. "Ethan Cole, thought you were 6 feet under." Ethan sighed. "Still here. Need an alternator for a '98 Ford Taurus." Marty whistled low. "That's not what you rode in for, though, is it?" Ethan leaned on the counter, voice low. "They came by. The Saints." He nodded. Marty's face darkened. "They don't forgive, Ethan. You know that. You walked out on them after your brother died. They called it betrayal." "I didn't walk out," Ethan said. "I buried my brother and realized I'd been riding for all the wrong reasons. I wasn't going to spill blood for a patch anymore." Marty shook his head. "You can't change the rules of the road once you've ridden it." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Maybe not, but I can choose not to let it ruin what's left of my life." He paid for the part, stuffed it into his saddlebag, and turned to leave. That's when he saw them. 2 bikes parked outside, chrome gleaming under the sun. His gut clenched. Rex stepped out of the shadow of a nearby gas pump, cigarette in hand. Another man followed, bigger, meaner, with the same insignia on his vest. "Well, well," Rex said, grinning. "Didn't take long, did it?" Ethan stayed still, hands loose but ready. "You got what you wanted. Leave me out of whatever's next." Rex took a step closer. "Can't do that, brother. You owe us blood, and now that we know where you live, maybe we'll pay your new family a visit." Ethan's eyes darkened. "You stay the hell away from them." Rex smiled, cruel and slow. "Then come back with us, ride one last time, settle your debt." The old anger flared like gasoline in Ethan's veins. He hadn't felt it in years, the heat, the pull of violence, but now it was there, pulsing through him. Without thinking, he grabbed Rex by the collar, shoving him against the wall. "You touch her or that kid, I'll end this right here." Rex's laugh was sharp. "There's the Ethan I remember." The big man moved forward, but Ethan turned, fist connecting hard with his jaw. The man stumbled back, spitting blood. Rex straightened, brushing off his vest. "This ain't over," he said coldly. "You know how the road works. It always leads back to us." He and his partner climbed onto their bikes, engines roaring as they disappeared down the highway, leaving Ethan standing in a cloud of dust, chest heaving, pulse hammering in his ears. He knew what came next. By the time Ethan returned home, the sun was setting. The cabin glowed amber in the dying light. Claire was outside, hanging laundry, her smile fading the moment she saw his face. "What happened?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. He took a deep breath, running a hand through his hair. "They came back, they know where we are." Fear flickered in her eyes, but she stayed calm. "What do they want?" "Me," he said simply. "They want me to go back. Or they'll come for what I care about." Claire stepped closer, her hand trembling as she touched his arm. "Ethan, what are you going to do?" He looked past her toward the horizon where the sun bled into the earth. "What I should have done a long time ago. Finish it." Her voice broke. "You can't just fight them." "I'm not fighting them, I'm ending it." Inside, Tommy peeked out from the window, his small face pressed against the glass. "Ethan, are you okay?" Ethan forced a smile. "Yeah, buddy. Everything's fine." But his eyes told another story. That night after Tommy had gone to sleep, Claire found him outside cleaning his gun, the same one he hadn't touched in years. The sight made her chest tighten. "Please," she whispered, "don't go back down that road." He looked up at her, eyes tired but steady. "Claire, I spent half my life running from who I was. But if I keep running, it's you and that boy who'll pay for it. I can't let that happen." Tears filled her eyes. "And if you don't come back?" Ethan stood, walked closer, and gently cupped her face in his rough hands. "Then at least you'll both be safe." She closed her eyes, the first tear slipping down her cheek. "You already gave up one life, Ethan. Don't give up another." He leaned forward and pressed his forehead to hers. "I'm not giving it up," he whispered. "I'm fighting for it." The moon hung high above them, pale and merciless. The desert wind carried the faint echo of engines in the distance, a sound that promised reckoning was already on its way. As Ethan holstered the gun and walked toward his bike, Claire stood on the porch, her heart pounding with a fear she couldn't name. The man who once ran from everything was riding again, but this time he wasn't running away, he was riding toward the storm. The night stretched long and restless over the desert. The moon hovered low, pale as bone, painting the sand in shades of silver and silence. Ethan rode through the darkness like a ghost retracing his sins, the engine's rumble echoing across the empty highway, the air sharp and dry in his lungs. Each mile took him deeper into the wasteland he once called freedom, and closer to the reckoning he'd been avoiding for years. He had no plan, no allies, no backup. Just an old pistol, a broken heart, and the ghost of his brother riding shotgun in memory. The road unfurled before him like a confession. Every white line another sin, another regret. He thought of Claire, of Tommy sleeping in the cabin, of the way her eyes had held both fear and faith when he said he'd come back. No one had ever looked at him that way before. Maybe that was why he couldn't let this end like every other story in his life, with loss, regret, and asphalt dust settling on his grave. He reached the outskirts of Winslow near midnight. The old warehouse where the Iron Saints used to gather still stood, the same rusted sign, the same cracked windows. The sound of motorcycles carried through the still night. They were waiting. Ethan parked his bike at the edge of the lot and killed the engine. The sudden silence roared in his ears. He walked through the gravel, every step deliberate, the weight of inevitability pressing down on him. The massive doors creaked open before he reached them. Inside, yellow light spilled out, thick with smoke and the stench of oil and whiskey. Rex stood in the center, flanked by 3 men, all younger, meaner, carrying the kind of arrogance that comes from thinking you're untouchable. He grinned when he saw Ethan. "Well, look who decided to come home," Rex said. "Didn't think you had it in you." Ethan's voice was calm, low. "I didn't come to rejoin. I came to end it." Rex laughed, stepping closer. "You don't end the Saints, brother. You just bleed out of them." Ethan's jaw tightened. "You sent someone to follow her, didn't you?" Rex's grin widened. "Relax. No one touched your little family. Yet." Something inside Ethan broke. Not with rage, but with clarity. He wasn't the same man who'd walked away all those years ago. He wasn't the reckless drifter who believed the road could fix a broken soul. He was something different now, quieter, heavier, but stronger because of it. He stepped forward, and for a moment the room fell silent. The men around Rex tensed, hands twitching toward their belts. Ethan spoke evenly, his voice carrying over the hum of tension. "You took everything from me once. My brother. My peace. I gave up everything to walk away clean. Don't make me finish what should have ended back then." Rex smiled coldly. "You think you can scare me, Cole? You're just one man." Ethan's hand hovered near his side. "That's one more than you'll have when this is over." The sound that followed was quick, brutal, inevitable. A blur of motion, shouts, metal scraping concrete. A gun went off. Then another. The air filled with smoke and the scent of cordite. When the noise finally settled, Rex was on the floor, clutching his arm, his eyes wide with disbelief. Ethan stood a few feet away, chest rising and falling, the pistol still hot in his hand. One of the younger men lay unconscious by the door. Another crawled toward the exit. Ethan didn't chase them. The point wasn't revenge anymore. It was closure. He stared down at Rex, voice steady. "It's over. You come near that cabin again, I won't miss next time." Rex spat blood and tried to speak, but Ethan turned away. He'd spent half his life running from violence. Now, walking away from it was the truest victory he could claim. He left the pistol on the ground, climbed onto his bike and rode into the night. Not as a fugitive, but as a man finally done with ghosts. By the time he reached the cabin, dawn was beginning to break. The sky burned in shades of rose and amber, the first light spilling across the desert. Claire was standing on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, eyes red from a night without sleep. The moment she saw the bike's silhouette crest the hill, she ran forward. He barely had time to park before she was in his arms. For a long moment neither spoke, the wind whispering through the dry grass, the world holding its breath around them. "You came back," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I told you I would." She pulled back just enough to look at him, the dust, the blood on his sleeve, the exhaustion carved into his face. "Are you hurt?" He shook his head. "Not anymore." Tommy's small voice came from the doorway. "Ethan!" The boy ran across the porch and threw himself into his arms. Ethan lifted him easily, holding him close, his rough hand resting on the child's back. Something inside him, something long frozen, finally melted. He looked over Claire's shoulder at the rising sun. "It's over," he said quietly. "The past won't follow us anymore." For the first time in years, he believed it. Over the weeks that followed, the rhythm of the cabin changed again. The tension that once lingered like a shadow was gone, replaced by the soft hum of a new kind of life. Ethan fixed the broken fences, rebuilt the porch, and planted a small garden out back with Tommy's help. Claire found a job in town, and laughter became a sound the walls recognized again. Sometimes late at night, Ethan would sit on the porch with a cup of coffee, listening to the faint hum of distant trucks along the highway. He still carried his scars, but they no longer owned him. The road would always be a part of him, wild, restless, unforgiving, but now it felt like a memory instead of a curse. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Claire joined him outside. She sat beside him quietly, their shoulders touching. "You ever miss it?" she asked. "The road?" he said, smiling faintly. "Sometimes, but not like before." "How do you know when you've finally stopped running?" Ethan thought for a moment, eyes fixed on the fading sky. "When the thing you're running from doesn't scare you anymore, and the place you're standing feels like home." She smiled, resting her head against his shoulder. "So, this is home?" He looked at her, at the glow of the lantern light on her face, at the faint laughter of Tommy inside the cabin. "Yeah," he said softly, "this is home." The wind moved gently through the desert grass, carrying the scent of rain that never came. The stars began to emerge one by one, like promises whispered into the night. For the first time in his life, Ethan Cole wasn't chasing anything. Not redemption, not escape, not ghosts. He had found what every rider on the open road was secretly searching for, not freedom, but belonging. And as he sat there with the woman and boy who had turned his silence into something alive again, he understood the truth that had taken him half a lifetime to learn. Home isn't a place you find. It's the moment you stop running.